is ongoing. We expect to have video from the military momentarily of this U.S. South Korean test of their anti-ballistic missile efforts. Kim Jong-un obviously celebrating what he's seeing as a major change of the dynamic here. Let's bring in our panel. Tim Farley, host and managing editor of Morning Briefing POTUS on SiriusXM Radio. Danielle Halper, contributing editor of the Washington Free Beacon. Michael Needham, chief executive officer at Heritage Action for America, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, Charles, read between the lines of Secretary Tillerson's statement there and the actions the U.S. is taking with South Korea tonight.
Well, I think the juxtaposition of the two clips you showed illustrates the issue and the reason why the Tillerson statement, I think, comes out rather ineffective. Putin is talking about using this crisis as a way to detach the United States from South Korea. In other words, China and Russia together want to see an end of the U.S.-South Korean alliance. They want to use the issue as a kind of an exchange in order to do that. We see this, and we should see this, as a direct threat to the security of the United States. It's an ICBM that can hit U.S. territory, and that would be absolutely catastrophic. We have completely different understandings of what the threat is, and Tillerson's statement simply says it's not a U.S. problem, it's a global problem. It is not. It's a U.S. problem. The global partners that we talk about are not that interested in solving it, and that's why all the importuning, all the sanctions, all the UN Security Council resolutions aren't going to do a damn thing. This is a threat to the United States, not to Russia, not to China, and therefore, as the president has said himself, we're going to have to solve the problem ourselves if we can.
But you don't think South Korea and Japan have a vested interest in trying to prevent North Korea from having a nuclear weapon?
They do, but they don't have the means. Only we do. And that's why they're clinging to the U.S. alliance. And that's why the Chinese and the Russians want to break it up, because it leaves them naked and exposed. But the Japanese have no alternative. The South Koreans have no alternative, because we provide the nuclear umbrella and their security. But we're being exposed as being impotent in doing this because we don't have the means to do it. The talk about a military option, I think, sounds to me fairly empty.
Michael.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it depends, though, Charles, how you're talking about the means. 10 years ago, we impounded $23 million from a Chinese bank, Banco Delta Asia, and for about 2 years, the North Koreans were really squirming under that pressure. What it requires is not necessarily a focus on the means or the tactics, but a complete strategic mind shift that says that in the past, we've tried to bring the North Koreans to the negotiating tables. President Clinton's agreed framework, President Bush's six-party talks, with a goal of getting them to accept denuclearization. We need a policy of active regime intolerance that says we're going to use economic pressure, we're going to use diplomatic pressure, we're going to use appropriate military pressure to make it very clear that there is no path forward for the Kim regime and to force them to come forward, because clearly the last 25 years of just thinking we can negotiate away nuclear weapons is something that's been an abject failure.
So the fact that you have Kim Jong-un, who has now launched more missiles than his father or grandfather combined, and he is doing so increasingly with success. I mean, it seems like this has changed the dynamic. Daniel, what do you see as a possible military response to that, considering the challenges of also possibly a mobile launcher this time?
Well, look, there could be cyber responses. I think we've done some in the past, or at least they've been rumored, and there are other ways to do it that are perhaps more subversive than overt military attacks. But as Michael said, we've had 25 years of failed North Korean policy. When it's failed in the past, the presidents have sort of gotten away with it because their military hasn't yet been advanced enough to inflict pain on the United States. Now it's different. There's a new leader. He has new capabilities. And if we fail now, it could really, I mean, the possibility, I don't want to sound too grim or too alarmist, but there are serious life and death implications to American citizens, and it's really incumbent on the president to use those means to force North Korea to do something different, and it requires, I think, different thinking than we've had in the past.
Tim, the only time we heard from the president today was about military families on the 4th of July. We saw it on the South Lawn there. Secretary Tillerson obviously taking point on this statement. The tweet earlier from the president, North Korea has just launched another missile. Does this guy have anything better to do with his life? Hard to believe that South Korea and Japan will put up with this much longer. Perhaps China will put a heavy move on North Korea and end this nonsense once and for all.
Well, that sort of gets to the question that Charles mentioned, was Japan and South Korea really can't do anything. I ask these questions. I don't know what the answer is, obviously, to this, but I go back to something Richard Haas had said a long time ago. There is no self-correcting mechanism in international relations. In the case of the policy, we know that strategic patience is over. Has that been replaced by strategic impatience? Has it been replaced by tactical patience? Or is it just ad hoc Twitter taunts from the president? And his point that China was not going to be able to do anything, I think I'm a little concerned, not just about what North Korea is doing, but the fact that we now have our inspections evidently closed off to our nuclear safety and security measures. They're keeping them quiet now, and you wonder what we can do that's proportional, whether it's cyber attacks or whatever, and what will get a response, because it is a U.S. problem. To Charles's point, this is something that the United States is going to have to respond to, and I don't know that you can build a coalition, especially if China is going to be in charge of the Security Council meetings this week.
Exactly. China is in charge of the UN Security Council, and there's supposedly a meeting in the works tomorrow afternoon to deal with this, but the prospects of getting something significant through with China in that point, and Russia obviously there as well.
I don't think it would make a difference if we were in charge of the Security Council. If we had the presidency, it would make no difference whatsoever. The Russians, it's a matter of the imbalance, the asymmetry of interests. Our interests are radically different from the Chinese and the Russians. And for 25 years, we've refused to accept that. The fact is, the others don't care. The missiles that are launched by Pyongyang are never headed west. They're always headed east. They're always headed our way. Everybody understands what the target is. So either we're going to act on our own, which is what the president says he'll do, or, and we are approaching the point, we're simply going to have to accept a nuclear North Korea the same way that under Mao Zedong, who was a fairly radical anti-American communist, we accepted the fact that China went nuclear as well. At a certain point, you bow to reality and you try to live in deterrence. It's not easy, it's uncomfortable, but I think we're going to reach that point where either it's going to be a binary choice. You go to war or you accept a nuclear North Korea.
A nuclear North Korea that clearly is trying to test missiles that get to the U.S. continental.
Which is absolutely unacceptable. And during the Cold War, we didn't just come to terms with a Soviet Union that had nuclear weapons on ICBMs pointed at the United States. We engaged in a policy that said at every single turn, we're going to figure out what is the most aggressive, appropriate response with regards to the Olympics, with regards to arms control, with regards to economic sanctions.
Time out. Let's just remind everybody, the 2018 Olympics, the Winter Games, are in South Korea. All of those countries that are going to send athletes to South Korea are going to do so potentially under this umbrella of uncertainty and security.
It's a fantastic point, and we need to make it absolutely clear that a nuclear-armed North Korea with weapons capable of reaching the United States under the Kim regime is absolutely intolerable to the United States. And that's where I think President Trump's comments on Friday were exactly spot on. It is time for a different mindset in approaching North Korea.
All right, we have more on this. We're again waiting video from the U.S. military on this testing that they are doing in response. Breaking news about North Korea. More after this break.